This week, we will go back or remain in the heavenly realms. Last week, we were discussing the Brahma realms, where we met Bhakka, the infamous Bhakka Brahma, and how he tried to hide from the gaze of Lord Buddha, and he couldn't. Commentaries say that he tried to go to the depths of the oceans in some universe, and Lord Buddha whispered, like, "What are you doing, Bhakka?" Then he tried to hide within the wings of butterflies in some other cosmos. Lord Buddha found him until he just gave up. So we saw how weak the heavenly realms are, despite the fact that human beings have been worshiping these Brahma gods, because they are different than us. They are in a much better situations that make us completely forget about the difficulties, suffering, and challenges that we have to face while living in this body. So one can be forgiven to some extent for thinking that the heavenly realms are much better than us, than here, being in this world as a human being. That you have to wash up, that you have to, shave, that you have to get up and go to work, that you have to, at the end of one's life, which apparently is not enough for many of us, even if it's 100 years, there's death. Obviously, before that, there's old age, sickness, etc. So naturally, people think of the heavenly realms as being completely free from such situations. Well, we saw that that's not the case, because the Brahma gods themselves, who are at a far higher level than the other devas, other divine beings, are full of delusion often, unless they have understood the Dhamma, unless they've come to see that there is impermanence, including themselves as Brahma gods, despite the fact that they would be living for trillions of years in some cases. So anicca, or impermanence, has to be understood. Suffering has to be understood, because whatever is impermanent is suffering, because the joyful situation that you're in, once you get to see, once you cut yourself free from the cocoon of wrong view, and you just see that, no, this too will pass, that gives you the bite, the sting of suffering. You don't try to hide it by bringing in a new, other pleasurable situation, experience, to cover it up, cover up this thing called dukkha, cover up this thing called anicca. No. A wise person will abstain from such tendencies. And then they also would see that, wait a minute, all these are different factors coming in together as a result of conditionality, causality. Therefore, me being a Bhakka Brahma, or you being over there somebody else, is just the outcome of series of situations, conditions. So there is nothing substantial, nothing fixed, nothing that I can call, oh, I am Mahabrahma. So when beings see that, it really doesn't matter whether it's a human being we're talking about, or a Deva, or even a Brahma. There will be insight appearing in the mind. There will be relinquishment of suffering. Then that person, that being, can even attain arahantship. So today, we come down a few notches from the Brahma realm, and we go to the Tavatimsa heaven, where the sutta will take place. And the sutta today is from the Majjhima Nikāya, and it is the Cūḻa Taṇhāsaṅkhaya Sutta, the shorter discourse on the elimination, on the destruction, the ending of craving. Here, we will see that the key player, the key figure within the sutta is not Baka Brahma, but someone we've come across so many times in our discourses, Sakka, or Indra, the king of the gods, whom I mentioned briefly last time. So, and we have Sakka. Of course, Lord Buddha is in the beginning part of the sutta, but we also have Venerable Mahamogallana, about whom we don't come, to discuss enough. We've talked about some of the suttas in the past, where Venerable Mahamogallana was the protagonist, was the questioner, such as in the Pachalayamana Sutta, which was one of the first suttas that we've covered in our explorations, which interestingly enough has a lot to do with today's sutta. The Pachalayamana Sutta was, I think it was the second week that we've done. Today is, I think, week number 120 of our series. But in it, we saw, in English, I translated as dozing off, the Sutta Pachalayamana. And in it, we saw how Venerable Mahamogallana was still struggling Sotapanna. He was a noble disciple, first stage, but he was struggling. It took him only a week to become an arahant. But during that week, he was struggling with his drowsiness, his sleepiness, his sluggishness, procrastination, maybe also we could say. And we saw how Lord Buddha approached him, seeing that he was dozing off. And he said, Mogallana, were you sleeping? And he says, yes, Bhante. But then he asked, after Lord Buddha gives him a series of different techniques to overcome his sluggishness, his lethargy, to be able to sit through the hours, through the night. At the end of that, Venerable Mahamogallana asked him a question about, could there be a brief teaching, a concise, packed, but very thorough teaching, whereby the bhikkhu who follows it could attain freedom from craving, from the challenges of the asavas, and therefore become an arahant? And Lord Buddha says, yes. So this sutta has within it that same message, but the recipient of that instruction is none other than Sakka. So without explaining too much in the beginning, so I'm just going to dive right in and stop as need be and discuss. Okay, so today's sutta is MN 37, Majjhima Nikāya, Middle Length Discourses, number 37. Cūḻa Taṇhāsaṅkhaya Sutta, shorter discourse on the destruction of craving. I have personally heard this. At one time, while the Blessed One was living in Savathi's Pubba monastery, at the palace of Migara's mother, Sakka, the king of the Devas, approached, and after paying homage, by respectfully worshipping and bowing down to the Blessed One, he stood to one side and said, Bhante, is there a brief and encapsulating instruction, a concise and well-defined teaching that can easily be discerned, and with the help of which a bhikkhu, following it closely, gets liberated through the destruction of craving, and once having won the highest goal of the holy life, that is freedom from bondage, Bhante, how could such a bhikkhu, once and for all, come to be recognized as truly supreme among both devas and humans? You can easily unravel this and form it into at least 4 or 5 different questions. But I like to it's almost like a paragraph, right? But it's essentially one question. Is it possible for a person to be truly free? That's the question. Because he's still a Sotapanna. Sakka was a Sotapanna. And perhaps it's good to mention a few things about him and being a Sotapanna here, how that came about. There is a sutta in the long discourses, in the Digha Nikāya, sutta number 21, if I'm not mistaken, Sakka Sutta, Panha Sutta, the questions of Sakka, the king of the gods. In it, we see how the first encounter that took place between Lord Buddha and Sakka, Indra. In some traditions, they call him Indra. In India, they don't recognize him as Sakka, but he's the same person. He was in the sutta we see over there in that sutta, in the Sakka Sutta, we see how Sakka is perplexed. He's afraid because he's just been hit with a realization. And just like Baka, the Brahma we saw last week, he was under the impression that he lives forever, a long time, until one of his gods, the Deva Gopaka, scolded three servant gods that were now there serving Sakka, king of the gods, in the Tavatinsa heaven, the realm of the 33 gods. Now, the problem was that these three servants slash Gandhabas, they're still devas. They're much better, at a better state than human beings. But these three used to be bhikkhus in their past life. And Gopaka was, in fact, Gopika, lay female disciple of a Buddha in earlier times. So she knew these three. And they were now not liberated, but they were serving as mediocre, average, or sub-average devas, serving Sakka. Still, it's a lofty position compared to any human king that we have today. As a Gandhabba, you're far better off than King of England, let's say. But still, it's pretty mediocre. It's sub-average. It's kind of to be looked down upon by the other gods. So Gopaka, being one of the 33 gods, looks at them and says, what's your excuse? How did you end up being in such a low status than I? As now being a male deva living in the 33 realms. I practiced, he says, Gopaka says. So Gopaka now gives them a Dhamma discourse. Meanwhile, Sakka is sitting there being served by these three Gandhabba gods. And there, of course, they're really shaken up, and these gods, and two of them immediately understand the message, and they understand the three characteristics of existence through this very brief Dhamma discourse that's given to them by this god, Gopaka, who is one of the retinue members of Sakka's Tavatimsa heaven. So immediately those two, because they now lose interest in the heavenly realms, and they see through with insight, while listening to the Dhamma being given to them, two of the three immediately get to be reborn in a higher realm where there isn't the sensual lust present. Sakka sees this. But the other monk, the other slash Gandhabba god, he's still very much intoxicated by the sensuality and all that the realm of Sakka could provide for him. So he stays a Gandhabba. The other two disappear. So Sakka sees this. And he's really startled because he sees a reality that he didn't know. He now has to take certain things into consideration, especially because soon after, he displays the 5 signs that occur to a Deva before they pass away. So Sakka himself manifests in his body those 5 signs that make the god, as well as those around him or her, to know that they're about to die from that state. So one of them is their luster and luminescence dissipates. They're not so lustrous anymore. The heavenly flowers they have in their hair, they start wilting and fading. Devas don't sweat, but for the first time they start sweating, in fact, sweating from the armpits. Their clothing that used to look so brilliant, so heavenly, suddenly look, raggedy and very old, worn out. And the god suddenly displays this sense of disgust or kind of bored from that position. They're not interested anymore. They just want to go away, type of a thing. They just like, it's like, pushing and shoving being in that position. So suddenly Sakka displays these 5. Now immediately, guess who he goes to for help? Because he's very much attached to being a Deva. So he reaches for Gopaka, and Gopaka tells him basically, well, you're lucky because there is a Buddha now alive, and he's in Rajagaha. You should go and speak with him. So basically, that's how the Sakkapanya Sutta takes place. And Sakka is desperate because he knows any moment he will die. And he doesn't know where he will end up. Because of that encounter, that whatever he witnessed with those 2 Bhikkhu/Gandhabas who were now reborn in a higher realm. So he basically saw that. He was pretty smart. He still is. That he too could liberate himself from that predicament that he will die. So that's where we see in the Sakkapanya Sutta, he coming and he tries, one day we'll cover that sutta. It's a long sutta. It's in the Digha Nikāya. But at the end of that sutta, or near the end of that sutta, we see Sakka understanding the Dhamma. And he's filled with joy and equanimity. And he understands Lord Buddha's discourse. At that moment, there's that insight. The moment of insight is so powerful that he penetrates through and he attains the level of stream winner. He becomes a Sotapanna. So, at that moment, he dies as Sakka and he is reborn as Sakka again. Because of his attachment. He could have easily gone to another realm, just like those other Gandhabas, but he doesn't, because he was very much in love with his status as the chief of the gods. So, having this as a background of where we are, basically, with Sakka, we can begin to understand what will ensue as the sutta unfolds. So, you won't see that urgency in him that you did see through my summary of the Sakkapanya Sutta within Sakka himself. So here we see, still though, he would come and visit every once in a while, but not with that much eagerness that he did in that other sutta that I mentioned. So this is where he's coming from. He's curious. He's curious. Okay. And so he asked, could there be such an encapsulating brief instruction so concise that a bhikkhu could follow and thus attain liberation from craving, destruction of craving, whereby he becomes or she becomes regarded as truly supreme among both devas and humans? And Lord Buddha's response is, "Hear, O Lord of Devas, the Bhikkhu ponders that nothing is suitable." Lord Buddha says yes, by the way. There's a typo there, but I'll fix that. But anyhow, Lord Buddha is responding here. "Here, O Lord of Devas, the Bhikkhu ponders that nothing is suitable to be entered into or grabbed onto." The same instruction he gave, Lord Buddha gave to Mahamogallana in the Pachalayamana Sutta. Sabbe dhamma nalang abhinivesaya. That's the Pali phrase. Nothing is suitable to be entered into or clung onto. Abhinivesaya is also like when you enter a hall, enter a domain, enter a house. But you just go through it, you just come out of it without holding on, without having grabbed onto anything, any of the woodwork, any of the sculptures, any of the walls, nothing. You don't grab onto anything. You just come in and out. You don't grab anything. That's abhinivesaya. Now, when such a bhikkhu ponders that nothing is suitable to be entered into or grabbed onto, then he comes to directly know and understand everything and one's relationship to everything. Of course, the first statement was very, very brief. This second couple of lines is also brief, but a little bit more expanded. Now, this is where Lord Buddha is going to unfold it a little bit more. Then, King of Gods, once the bhikkhu directly knows and understands everything thus, he observes each of his feelings that arise, whether pleasant, painful, or neutral. And he sees that each of these are in fact impermanent, never lasting. Now, when he truly sees this, he then also understands how, each of these feelings fade away and vanish, which leads him to become disenchanted with them. Then, in seeing and understanding that each of these feelings cease in their intensity, the bhikkhu becomes dispassionate towards them. And this leads him to relinquish his grip from wanting or grabbing onto anything. As a result, by not grabbing onto anything, thus, he no longer becomes anxious, restless, or agitated. And by not becoming agitated anymore, he experiences the ultimate relief, that is Nibbana. It is at that instance that the bhikkhu comes to know directly, with full understanding. Birth is now finally destroyed. The holy life has now been fully lived, with its true goal achieved. There is no more coming back to any state of becoming. This, O King of Devas, is therefore the brief and encapsulating instruction, the concise teaching that can be defined, with the help of which a bhikkhu, following it closely, gets liberated through the destruction of craving. And by having won the highest goal of the holy life, that is freedom from bondage, he once and for all comes to be recognized as truly supreme among both devas and humans. Feelings is what unites us. The phenomenon of feelings, having feelings. We're addicted to feelings, not just any kind of feeling, but feelings that are hot, feelings that are intense in their color, in their tone. That's why we're not interested in bland feelings. We don't even consider them feelings. What we see in the Dhamma, neutral feelings. Remember, there's three kinds of feelings. In general sense, there's three: pleasurable, painful, and neutral. The hot feelings I was referring to are the extremes of pleasurable feelings and the painful feelings. One has the absence of the painful. The other has the absence of the pleasurable. And that basically is, or they are the two extremes of the pendulum, where we go seesawing back and forth in. So long as we are captives of such a state of affairs, what that means is we're going to constantly be in a state of agitation. So long as we are in a state of agitation, Nibbana is the farthest thing from us. It's not going to happen. The farther shore does not even come close to us. It's not going to happen. Why? Because there is a desire for one over the other. And this is why many people are stuck, even while being, going through the training of the Patipada, the training in the Dhamma of this Lord Buddha's discipline, teaching, guidance, despite the fact that we practice, so long as we are still attached to some emotionality, some feeling, Lord Buddha is clearly saying here, that person will not be recognized as supreme among gods and humans. Why? Because they will get hot when it's hot outside. They will feel cold when it's frigid outside. And here I'm referring to the mindset. The person becomes influenced, hence the abhinivesaya part comes in. The arahant is a person who does not cling. Of course, they're experiencing it. Of course, they've entered the house, but they haven't grabbed onto anything. The situations in life, the scenarios they have to undergo, fine. But when they come out of that situation, they really come out of that situation without latching onto anything. Nothing to call one's own. My feelings, my experiences, you did that to me. Remember the Dhammapada verses? He hurt me, he beat me. So long as there is that, hatred will never be appeased, Lord Buddha says in the Dhammapada verses. So dispassion or viraga, or the fading away of the passion, either of those extremes, will enable the person to penetrate. In fact, that is one of the best ways to gauge whether your practice is growing or not. If you're still very much passionate, you still have a long way to go about anything. So I encourage people to spend some time honestly sitting down with themselves, get a journal, get something, a piece of paper, or just a walk in the park, just walk on your own, away from things, even your aspirations, and just look at what's really happening. Does your heart still palpitate with passion? Do you get anxious about certain things happening or not happening? Okay, then you need to do some work still. Don't believe the quiet meditation that you were in for 3 hours straight. That's wonderful, but where did that lead you to? It has to serve a purpose. So upekkha is what I'm referring to here. The upekkha that enables a person to really penetrate. And that is what is key, what is necessary. In fact, that was also there when Sakka became Sakka the Sotapanna. The level of equanimity is so deep that everything is relinquished. Prior to that, there's a certain level of joy taking place. And that dissipates, and then there's the equanimity left behind, which opens the doors for the deathless to occur. Now, it could happen in such a way where it's so fast, where, depending on the person's development on this path, in the past and the present, that, like Venerable Bahia was, he just shot through all the 4 stages whoop, quickly. His depth of understanding was so ripe. Or it could be like it was with Sakka, King of the Gods, who's asking this question, right? And the end of which he attained to Sotapatti. He became a noble disciple of the first level. So he also experienced upekkha. That is essential. There is no agitation in that state. Impossible. It's very, very deep. So your meditation is simply preparing your mind to be okay when less and less and less and less passion and anxiety or being agitated is there. And you be fine with that. So you're preparing the mind. We don't attach ourselves to the quiet. We don't attach ourselves to anything. The tranquility of mind, otherwise it's just nonsense. Remember, last week we were talking about assets, upadhi, or possessions. There's nothing to hold on to objectify. Nothing, including in your practice. Nothing. Let's continue. Then, this is so Lord Buddha explained that, and let's continue this. Then Sakka, the king of Devas, while delighting in his agreement with the words spoken by the Blessed One, again paid homage as he venerated the Blessed One, and after circumambulating him and keeping the Lord to his right, he then and there vanished in a respectful manner. Meanwhile, the Venerable Mahamogallana, who had been sitting there near the Blessed One, witnessing this instruction given to Sakka, king of the Devas, began reflecting. I am curious to know whether that Yakka really understood the words spoken to him by the Blessed One. By the way, Yakka is a term that is used for anyone who is not human. So there is a realm of devas, and then they're in the Chatu Maharajika realms, of course, the Yakkas, who are Yakkas, powerful beings. If you remember Hemavati Sutta, yeah, I think it was, from the Sutta Nipata's verses we did some time ago. They were two Yakka generals, but in this case, Yakka doesn't refer to them. Yakka here is in reference to Sakka, who is not human. Sometimes Yakka is also a term that's given to an arahant, because you're no longer a regular person. You've cut the connection with being a putujjana. You're done. So when in referring to you, there's different terms that Lord Buddha used and the Arya Savakas. And in this case, we're talking about the chief disciple, Venerable Mahamogallana, speaking in his mind. He's like, I wonder if this Yakka really got what Lord Buddha said. Although, and he continues in his reflection, although he did seem delighted as he vanished and left the presence of the Blessed One, could it be that he truly took it to heart? Perhaps it's best if I personally go and find out myself. Venerable Mahamogallana, the chief in his psychic abilities, compared, second only to Lord Buddha. Then, just as quickly as a strong man would stretch out his flexed arm or bend back his outstretched arm, the Venerable Mahamogallana suddenly disappeared from the Blessed One's presence at the Pubba monastery in Savatthi, and immediately reappeared in the company of the Devas of the 33 within the Tavatinsa heavenly realm. By the way, the city of Savatthi, or today's modern day Shravasti, it had two, I might have mentioned this before, two monasteries. First, the one that was built by Anathapindika, in Jetas Park, which is called the Western Monastery. And then Visakha, the female donor, I guess there was a silent competition between them. She wanted to build another monastery where, she would see Lord Buddha more often. The distance is walkable. I've walked between the two. There's very little left from the Pubba monastery. It's like a small house, this and that. But we do have one of the pillars of Emperor Ashoka still there, which the Hindus actually there's a portion of it left, and it's still underground, big part of it, and they've turned that into a Shiva Linga, the Hindus, and they worship it as a Shiva Linga. Meanwhile, it's simply a marker by Emperor Ashoka that this was the holy spot of the Pubba monastery, Megada's mother. So they turned that into Shiva Linga. So basically, you have that happening if you go visit there. So anyhow, that is, and it was a huge palace, of which there's a small, like almost like a house left with some gardens around it. But anyhow, those were the places that sometimes Lord Buddha would go, and some of the Dhamma talks have been, suttas have been captured, done there, and most of them actually in Savatthi were done in the Anathapindikas part. Just side note. So now Venerable Mahamogallana is in Tavatimsa. That's quickly. Now at that time, Sakka, the king of Devas, being already back in his realm, was enjoying himself at the Eka Pundarika, or single lotus, heavenly pond. Eka means single or one, Pundarika, lotus, heavenly pond, surrounded by his Devas, as they all were attended to by maidens, while being entertained by divine musicians, engrossed into the 5 kinds of sumptuous heavenly music that they were providing him with. Sakka. So he just left Lord Buddha's presence. He even did the, 3 times walking around Lord Buddha, circumambulating, very respectfully, and disappeared. And he said, well, Bhante, I have to go, basically. It's important work to do as a god, Boom, he's there with his orchestra playing. He's enjoying the, sensual pleasures. Then Sakka, the king of Devas, on seeing the Venerable Mahamogallana approach in the distance, quickly dismissed those heavenly musicians and went up to greet the Venerable Mahamogallana. I mean, he was basically caught in the act, in a sense. And he says, welcome, good Sir Moggallana. You are most welcome here, indeed, good Sir Moggallana. At last, good Sir Moggallana, you honor us with this rare occasion to come and visit us here. Please, sir, kindly have a seat here. Good Sir Moggallana, continued Sakka, king of the gods, as he offered his own seat to the Venerable Mahamogallana, while he himself took a low seat and sat to one side. And that is the respectful thing to do to a teacher. And if you ever come across suttas where that is not done, then it means that that person, the host or whoever's welcoming them in a sense, does not have a welcoming attitude nor is respectful. Then the Venerable Moggallana addressed Sakka. Kosya was a term of his name as a layperson when he did earn those merits because of his wonderful actions. He and the other 33 devas of the Tavatimsa heaven had committed by helping this town, this city, this village in their time of need, and selflessly with so much metta, they've done so much work. So in that birth of his as a human, his name was Kosya. And because Venerable Mahamogallana, there's no filters like of past lives, this and that, he could see right through. And Sakka remembers because he was already told by Lord Buddha as to the good deeds he had committed to be earning that position of Sakka. He knows who's he referring to. So Kosya, it was Sakka's name from a previous life. Kosya, could you share with us here what the Blessed One explained when you asked him about the bhikkhu who is released? That brief and encapsulating instruction, the concise and well-defined teaching that can be easily discerned, and with the help of which the bhikkhu gets liberated through the destruction of craving by putting an end to suffering. Good Sir Moggallana, we are too busy with so many duties at the moment, you see. There are so many duties and tasks I must attend to, with much to do for the gods of the 33. However, do not fret, for whatever was to be grasped and understood from the instruction given to us by the Blessed One, I assure you, we have learned, memorized, and understood quite well. after having carefully heeded and paid attention to, of course, for it is a teaching that will stay with us. How many times do you attend the Dhamma talk, or one that's physical or one like this, where you feel like, yeah, I got this. Yeah, I'm good to go. All right, back to work, back to my pillow, back to my whatever it was you're doing. We do that, don't we? I got this. Yes, 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 yes. Or you see a reference in some sutta or statement that Lord Buddha makes, and it touches you. It's like, yeah, yeah, that's nice. And maybe you can even daydream for a few seconds. And yeah, yes. You might even get inspired, right? But you're still left in your own cesspool of diaper, in ignorance, stuck. Nothing happened. Here we see Sakka coming up with an excuse. He's in a diaper full of his own cesspool of ignorance. Even as a Sotapanna. That changes so much for so many people, because many people are just dying to attain even the first stage of Nibbana, without realizing that it is not arouseship. There's still a lot more work to be done, because the five senses are still very attractive. He was just enjoying, by the way, the five-fold musical, I guess, accompaniment. Usually it means there were symbols as in, things that chime, and drums like tom-toms, sitar-like thing like harps and things. So the whole shebang, including somebody doing the dancing. So you have visual, auditory, all of this has nothing to do with what Lord Buddha said. Sabbe dhamma nalang abhinivesaya, nothing to be holding on to, be entered into. And he is in the smack dab center of it, of sensuality. I mean, if Venerable Mahamogallana did not show up, he was going to enjoy the rest of that. It was interrupted by his appearance. That's why he kind of was ashamed, one could surmise. Anyhow, however, now that you are here, good Sir Moggallana, I would like to speak to you about something else. It's interesting because I've seen this happen in therapy sessions and with also students, where you want to address a certain problem and they try to deviate you in a very subtle way. So, yeah, Bhante, but there's this other thing, I saw this person over there. It's like, da, 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 da. That's what I see him doing. And he continues, in the past, there was a battle waged between the gods and the asuras. Asuras are the demigods who used to be gods, but because of their intoxication and lack of sila, they dropped to lower realms. Now, in that battle, we defeated the asuras, and on our return from our well-won battle, to celebrate the victory, I created a magnificent mansion, the divine Vejayanti Palace. It is quite something else in all of existence. The palace itself has 100 towers, and each of them itself has 7 pinnacles, with 700 separate chambers. Now, each one of those massive chambers has 7 nymphs living in its expansive space. And every one of those nymphs, maidens, has 7 attendants per individual nymph. Basically, a sultan would just be drooling at this point, knowing that his vast harem is dwarfed by even one of those chambers. Each chamber has 50, I'm sorry, wait a minute, 7 nymphs living, and but there's 700 separate chambers. Anyhow, good Sir Moggallana, you must take a look at it. Please, would you like to see the splendor of our magnificent Vijjayanti palace? One would wonder as to whether this was really Sotapanna speaking. I really had, some doubts initially when I was going over the sutta years ago or being introduced to it. And then I see something that Sakka mentions in relation to his connection to Venerable Mahamogallana. And that was pretty much, validation that he was, yes, a Sotapanna. Anyhow, well, we'll get to that. I'll let you know when that point comes, in case you don't figure it out in your own. So he's now trying to invite Venerable Moggallana to go and see. Venerable Moggallana came in asking a very specific question. Not only did he push aside the question, claiming that he has more responsibilities, other responsibilities. He doesn't have time for Dhamma, basically, because he got it. He got what Lord Buddha's message was. But he's showing him something that why would a bhikkhu be interested in such nonsense? Basically, to go and see your prostitutes. Basically, that's what it is. Those nymphs were nothing more than that, ultimately. And the Venerable Mahamogallana accepted with his silence. Some commentators have debated, like, so why would he want to? Why would he accept such an invitation? With short-sightedness, one would say, well, that was inappropriate. Why would he, But when you look at the presence of Venerable Mahamogallana's being there, why did he come to the palace? Why did he come to the Teotihuacan heaven? From leaving Lord Buddha's presence and showing up there. Why? Karuna. Compassion. Once a teacher, always a teacher. There's that statement. And there's so much love here to seek the improvement in the status of a fellow noble disciple, because Venerable Mahamogallana, in this case, obviously knows that Sakka was a noble disciple, even though Sakka has forgotten that fact. That's why a teacher teaches, despite the fact that so many times students betray that relationship, forget their role, forget the reason why they're in the Dhamma. So here we see still Venerable Mahamogallana saying, okay, let's use that as an opportunity for us to teach some Dhamma to this thick-headed yakha. So he agrees in silence. And then Sakka, the king of Devas, while being accompanied by the great king Vessavana, who happened to be one of the 4 Chatu Maharajikas, which is the lowest level or the level next to us, the heavenly realm. So he's one of those kings. Vessavana followed the Venerable Mahamogallana as they all proceeded towards the Vijjayanti palace. So they're walking behind Venerable Mahamogallana out of respect. When the teacher walks, when a bhikkhu walks, the student or layperson always walks a step or more behind them. Okay, it's inappropriate, whether it's a samanera or samaneri, whatever, to be walking with, unless the bhikkhu calls them over and asks them a question or something. Anyhow, now on seeing the Venerable Mahamogallana approach in the distance, Sakka's maidens, namely the nymphs living in the palace, quickly rushed back into their chambers, embarrassed and ashamed, much like the daughters-in-law who, on seeing their mother-in-law in public, become extra cautious and get into their best considerate behavior. Of course, times have changed. This was happening, the culture that has saved all these discourses and brought it to us is the Asian or Indian and then the South Asian tradition, Southeast Asian. So where this still to this degree, to this day actually has some relevancy. some degree of importance, and you do see such behaviors. I have personally seen this behavior of daughters-in-law becoming very much reserved or being at their best behavior, as they say, in the presence of their in-laws. And it's not necessarily out of fear, but out of respect, because you must have certain filters in your behavior depending on who's around you. Today, we have a culture of humanity that has completely disregarded that. People behave in public the way they would behave in their private homes, domiciles. They behave the same way as they would in their bedroom, outside, in public. You know, this is shamelessness. So these maidens, when they saw their lord and king come, they rushed, but then they saw who the Sakka was accompanied by, and they quickly pulled back, because even they saw something special in this bhikkhu. Then Sakka, the king of gods, and his companion, the great king Vesavana, kept walking in and out of the many chambers of the Vaijayanti palace, as they excitedly invited the Venerable Mahamogallana to walk into this hall, that chamber, this room, and so on, while both continued exclaiming in utter amazement, "Ah, behold, good Sir Moggallana, look at all the splendor of this Vaijayanti palace. Good Sir Moggallana, all this amazing splendor is, after all, because of our dear Venerable Cūḻa Sakka, having done such incredibly meritorious deeds in his past." So they're drooling with all excitement. And then the Venerable Mahamogallana began reflecting. And this foolish yucca is indeed quite heedless, living in complete negligence. Perhaps I should just go ahead and jolt him by arousing a sense of urgency in him. Then the Venerable Mahamogallana, while gently touching the Vajayanta palace or Vajayanti palace with his big toe, used his psychic power and shook its entire vast structure with a tremendous tremble, gave it a massive earthquake with his big toe. Suddenly, on witnessing this, Sakka, the king of the gods, along with his friend, the great king Vesavana, as well as the entire retinue of the 33 Devas of Tavatissa, were in shock and disbelief, utterly amazed at how a mere recluse could so easily cause such a mighty earthquake, terrifying the inhabitants of the stunningly colossal heavenly palace with the simple touch of his big toe. With their mouths wide open in astonishment, they exclaimed, "How amazing! How incredibly and unbelievably marvelous! Witness this venerable one's mighty power. Without lifting a finger, but only with the slight touch of his toe, he shook the entirety of our Lord's colossal Vajayanta palace, giving it a tremendous quake as if it's nothing." And on seeing Sakka, the king of the gods, become thus pale in the face with fright, jolted by this demonstration of his psychic abilities, the Venerable Mahamogallana turned to him and again asked him the question he had asked earlier. "So, Cūḻa, would you mind sharing with us here what the Blessed One explained when you asked him about the bhikkhu who is released? Could you recount for us that brief and encapsulating instruction, the concise and well-defined teaching that can be easily discerned, with the help of which the bhikkhu gets liberated through the destruction of craving by putting an end to suffering? This because we would very much love to hear what the Blessed One had to say in answer to your question." You can almost see him shivering. Sakka, the king of the gods. Our most revered Venerable Moggallana, earlier I had gone to see the Blessed One, and after paying homage by respectfully worshipping and bowing down to the Blessed One, I stood to one side and asked, Bhante, is there a brief and encapsulating instruction, a concise and well-defined teaching that can be easily discerned, and with the help of which a bhikkhu, following it closely, gets liberated through the destruction of craving, and once having won the highest goal of the holy life, that is freedom from bondage, Bhante, how could such a bhikkhu once and for all come to be recognized as truly supreme among both devas and humans? Then, Venerable Sir, the Blessed One replied to my question in the following manner. Yes, here, O Lord of the Devas, the bhikkhu ponders that nothing is suitable to be entered into or grabbed onto. Now, when such a bhikkhu ponders that nothing is suitable to be entered into or grabbed onto, then he comes to directly know and understand everything and one's relationship to everything. That's why when you are sitting in your meditation, when you are practicing sila, no one is holding your hand. No one is sitting next to you when you are facing your hindrances, when you're sitting to practice, when you're meditating. No one is holding your hand when you're practicing sati. You are holding the hand of sati, of course, as I like to say, but you're alone. The experiences you're having are also very solitary, one-on-one, as it were. It's direct. That's why we do not share what we're experiencing. We do not go around like with a loudspeaker telling the world, hey, I am experiencing this, oh, I am experiencing that. Did you experience this like I did? Anyone who speaks like that is not speaking Dhamma, is not practicing the Dhamma. It's personal. And the challenges you're facing are also personal. And that's why if and when you push through and you come out of that ordeal of that moment, whether it's you facing a difficult situation where your old proclivities come and you have a tendency to break sila as before, but you push through and you say, no, I trust the Dhamma, I trust my teacher, I trust Lord Buddha. I'm going to do it just like he did. I'm going to push through it and I'm going to come out alive. I'm going to cross over this hurdle. And when you do, it's so direct. It's so directly visible. It's immediate. Sanditthiko, directly visible. It's personal. Similarly, when you're not grabbing onto things, this is not information for us to gather. That's what I'm also trying to say. The Dhamma is not a series of data, input, zeros and ones, sutta input, one after the other, checking off boxes. It's none of those things. That's why it doesn't have any glamour. Anybody who looks for glamour, anybody who's looking for attention, anybody who's seeking some type of narcissistic goals is failing and will continue to fail. Anything that you do to kind of stand out, you're failing miserably in the Dhamma. But you might be attractive to others. But that's cheap. That's you sitting in a diaper full of your own feces. Nothing else. Nothing else. Then, King of Gods, Lord Buddha continues, once the bhikkhu directly knows and understands everything thus, he observes each of his feelings that arise, whether pleasant, painful, or neutral, and he sees that each of these are in fact impermanent, never lasting. Now, when he truly sees this, he then also understands that each of these feelings fade away and vanish, which leads him to become disenchanted with them. This disenchantment is crucial, nibbida. If your life is still full of, or even to some extent, somewhat full of situations where you are seeking to be enchanted, to become enchanted by life, by circumstances, by things, by people, by associations, by experiences of the Dhamma even, then you're far away from the Dhamma. And never the twain shall meet. Why? Because there needs to be nibbida. There needs to be that sense of disgust, that sense of disenchantment with the way you were yesterday and the years before. So the Dhamma doesn't come to embellish those, to make it even more glossy, to make it even more shiny, those other qualities that you carried with you. And that's why a lot of people are not practicing the Dhamma. People go on retreats, people go do meditation, so-called meditation. People even talk about the Dhamma, whether in robes or not. Something must be dying in them. Something unwholesome should be dying in them. The connections they had with yesterday, the behaviors they had yesterday, the attachments they had to things, to habits, this and that, their way of thinking has to be dying. So you cannot be your version of yesterday today and still be progressing in the Dhamma. It's impossible. You cannot be the same way you were yesterday and attain Sotapatti. It's impossible. Impossible. And if that's the case with the first level of attainment, then what can we say about the second, third, and fourth levels of attainment? Sakadagami, Anagami, and Arahant. So attaining the first stage requires so much. For that, the key thing to remember is nibbida, the disgust, the disenchantment, which has everything to do with the fading away of those passionate ways of doing things. You must die. That part of you must die that you loved to hold on to. It could be the ways of your thought, the certain attachments, ideas. They have to go. And this leads him to relinquish his grip from wanting or grabbing onto anything. Lord Buddha continues. As a result, by not grabbing onto anything, thus, he no longer becomes anxious, restless, or agitated. And by not becoming agitated anymore, he experiences the ultimate relief that is Nibbana. It is at that instance that the Bhikkhu comes to know directly with full understanding. Birth is now finally destroyed. The holy life has now been fully lived, with its true goal achieved. There is no more coming back to any state of becoming. This, O King of Devas, is therefore the brief and encapsulating instruction, the concise teaching that can be defined, with the help of which a bhikkhu, following it closely, gets liberated through the destruction of craving. And by having won the highest goal of the holy life, that is freedom from bondage, he once and for all comes to be recognized as truly supreme among both devas and humans. This, O good Sir Moggallana, was therefore the teaching in brief, which we received from the very lips of the Blessed One earlier, in response to the question we asked. It is thus that the Blessed One explained the matter, in this manner, whereby one may achieve the complete destruction of craving. Then the Venerable Mahamogallana, delighting in his agreement with the words spoken by Sakka, the king of the gods, suddenly disappeared from the company of the Devas of the 33, within the Tavatimsa heavenly realm. just as quickly as a strong man would stretch out his flexed arm or bend back his outstretched arm, as he immediately reappeared into the presence of the Blessed One at the Pubba monastery in Savatthi. Now, the moment the Venerable Mahamogallana vanished from their midst, those nymphs and maidens of Sakka, the king of gods, approached and asked him, "Our dear Lord and Master, was that the Blessed One? The one whom you have mentioned to us to be your teacher?" "No, that was not the Blessed One, the one whom I have mentioned to you to be my teacher. That was our very dear companion in the holy life, our dear Venerable Mahamogallana." And this also is a clear indication in the holy life, Brahmacharya. So basically, in the holy life, he's now including himself within the audience, as in Venerable Mahamogallana was an arahant, and he was basically in a sidewinded, indirect way stating that he's also part of that holy life as a sotapanna. This is what I was referring to earlier. Otherwise, he doesn't have the right to say that as a mere householder, because even as a god or a Brahma god, doesn't matter. If you're a householder, if you're not a noble disciple, you're not part of the Brahmacharya life in that sense. But he did say that this is our companion in the holy life. And those nymphs and maidens of Sakka, the king of gods, exclaimed, "In that case, oh good sir, you are indeed blessed. You are truly fortunate for calling such a venerable one as your spiritual companion in the holy life, someone with such unbelievable might and power. It is so difficult to fathom that despite his tremendous power, the Venerable One is still a mere student of the Blessed One, your teacher, whose full power and might one cannot then even begin to imagine." So if this was the student, what could the teacher's power be like? Meanwhile, the Venerable Mahamogallana, having returned back to Savatthi, approached the Blessed One, and after paying his respects to the teacher, sat to one side and reported to him what had taken place earlier that day. And the Blessed One reiterated, "Indeed, Moggallana, it was in just that manner, as reported, that I explained in brief to Sakka, the king of gods, the very means by which one may attain release through the destruction of craving." That is what the Blessed One said, and the Venerable Mahamogallana was delighted in listening to the words spoken to him by the Blessed One. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. There is such a big difference between listening and hearing. What are we practicing? Is it hearing or is it listening? Listening requires attention, manasikara. What kind of attention? In this path and discipline of the Dhamma, of the Buddha Sasana, it must be yoniso manasikara, looking at the point of origin, not telling ourselves some fables and tales and stories of how it will be, how it could be, how it should have been, how this was. No. Seeing things for what they are, yatabhutang, dasana, sometimes referred to as jnana dasana, seeing with wisdom, with understanding, has everything to do with being honest with ourselves, with our practice. Am I really practicing? Am I really getting this Dhamma, discourse? Lord Buddha says this here. Venerable Mahamogallana just stated that. Okay, let me revisit that. Let me see that. Let me carry that with me through the day and see if I'm able to apply this. He says very clearly, Lord Buddha, that I should not become agitated. Am I becoming agitated is a very honest, direct question that you can ask yourself. No one has to know this other than yourself, but it requires your 100% attention and honesty, truthfulness, Satya. Nibbana sometimes is referred to as Paramatta Satya, the absolute, ultimate truth. But that truth begins with us, nowhere else. Am I being truthful to myself? Often we are not. We're just full of stuff. So the Arahant is a person who's relinquished himself or herself from that diaper I was referring to you about. Just there's nothing left on him or her from yesterday. Why? Because they listen and they take yoniso manasikara with them everywhere they are experiencing life. And whatever arises, it's arising there and then, seeing it for what it is. And once their gaze shifts to some other experience, some other sense door, let's say, they are there now 100%. What happened to the other thing? History. Now, that doesn't mean that they've forgotten about it or they have amnesia. If anything that happens that's pertaining to that, they still know. They're very coherent. That's why their behavior matches their words. You will never find them crossing each other, having nothing to do with each other, in a sense. They never lie. Never. Because it's so burdensome to pretend. So truth also means not pretending, doesn't it? And for that to happen, we need to have listened, not to what we think we have heard, even though, remember, Sakka was saying, oh, it's already memorized, Bhante. It's in me. I got it. I got Bhante's, Lord Buddha's instruction to me. Don't worry about that. Let's go and check out my new dig, my new crib, my new palace. But one can say with certainty that had Sakka again reached that point in his life where he was about to die again, oh, he would not be interested in any palace or in building any palace, let alone filling it up with women. He would never leave Lord Buddha's side. Many people don't know or don't even consider that when people used to gather, we see them in the suttas, right? Bhikkhus, this, that, lay people, bhikkhunis, lay women, etc., would come and listen to a Dhamma talk. But we're talking so far about humans. The audience members who were not human far exceeded in number the number of people. The Devas present, the Brahmas who were present, listening to Lord Buddha's discourses, would fill up the place. Why would any being want to leave a Deva realm, including Sakka in this case, to come down to earth, to leave all their glory, all their joys and pleasures, in the case of Sakka? Why? And then we really bend over backwards, make up all kinds of excuses that we can't attend the retreat, let's say. Even a digital one where you don't have to leave your bedroom, your room, your garage, somewhere. And you have Wi-Fi, you have some connection. We do that. We've been doing that with all kinds of reasons. But what if your life was on the line? That is the urgency that is necessary to be with us in order for us to practice, period. Urgency. What if you're really there and the doctors have given up hope and they said you have 10 more minutes left? Would your practice change in its quality? Would your drive change? Would you finally say goodbye to that old version of yourself from yesterday and say, sorry, goodbye, time for you to go and just crawl into a cemetery or a cremation ground and leave me alone, and I'm just going to go on with my life now? Be fresh, truly. As children, we lived like that. Look at a child playing. They're so present. When we leave them to their devices, of course, when we don't give them a video game or something. So present. Even an animal is so present. Have you ever looked at a cow or an animal really up close? Or a cat? They're so present. They're like, are you going to hurt me? Are you going to hit me? Are you going to yell at me? Are you going to throw something at me? Are you going to give me something? Are you going to pet me? Are you going to what? You exist. Does the Dhamma exist for us when we're listening? That might be the very last time you're hearing anything pertaining to the Dhamma. That might be the very last time you're reading a sutta or a line from the sutta. How about your sitting? That might be the very last time you can become aware of your breath, not even the full in and out, but just the inhale or the exhale as Lord Buddha speaks to those bhikkhus in the contemplation of death, which we covered a few years ago, where one bhikkhu said, Bhante, I'm not sure, so certain that I will be alive after I've taken this inhale. So I'm not going to presume that, yeah, my sati wasn't so great coming in, but I'm definitely going to be with the sati, with this breath on its way out once it happens. No. Catch it from wherever sati comes in, joins, just hold on, just stay with it. Same thing with metta. Is it true metta, or is it just some mental hogwash, some mumbo jumbo you're telling yourself? Some affirmation is like, yeah, I'm supposed to. Do you feel it? Are you really smiling with your eyes? Is the skin texture changing with metta? Because that's what happens also, you know. Your blood flow change. And it transforms itself. There's joy. Otherwise, it's impossible for you to be tense and joyful. Your chest relaxes, the muscles around your heart, your chest muscles. Is that happening when I'm feeling metta? And if I'm not feeling it, if it's not happening, oh, let me visit that. Not to judge myself now, but just to ease up, ease, and just bring sati. Bring sati. Sati is always there. And sati is the thing that comes and says, hey, we're not listening to the Dhamma. Where's your mind? You're talking about something else that you're going to do right after this. What are you doing? That requires satya, truth, from us. So I will stop here and see if there are any questions. I hope the interactions with Sakka and Venerable Mahamogallana kind of reverberates with you, and it kind of makes you feel, because the objectification is the problem. In other places, we say sanya. What is sanya? You can objectify a sanya, a perception, but you can also objectify a thing that you're experiencing, turning it into a thing, something solid. So obviously here, Sakka had objectified his role as the king of the gods, right? He has all his entourage. Even when he goes and sees Lord Buddha, he's not going to go just by himself, you know. There's devas accompanying him. You don't get to be called king and you know, for nothing. But that can get through your head. That can really blur your vision. Just like in the case of Brahma, Baka. He objectified his role. Oh, I am the absolute, aren't I? This is the end. There's nothing beyond this. They're just like us, aren't they? When you take away all the bells and whistles of the roles of, you know, oh, he's Sakka, oh, he's Baka, oh, they're, you know, they live for eons. But when you take away all that, as far as the essential presence of ignorance, moha, it's the same. They're putujanas if they are not noble disciples, because they objectify things. So, am I objectifying anything in my life? It could be my role, it could be my relationship with myself, with something, whatever I'm feeling, whatever I'm experiencing. Am I objectifying my concepts, my ideas? Chances are we are doing those things. My pain. Okay, if I'm feeling sorrow, all right, can I make it wholesome sorrow? Can it be turned wholesome? And this Dhamma says, yes, absolutely, you can. Joy. Is my joy because I won the lottery, for example? Okay, that's extremely mundane. Can I turn that into something wholesome, wholesome joy? So this is where we can apply our thinking, apply our metta towards ourselves by simply asking this question, which I've asked you and have been, some of you, for a few years now. Is this taking me to Nibbana? And that's the quickest litmus test you can apply. Even if you're feeling sad and you think, yes, you know, I have to be, because you're too porous, let's say, in your boundaries with someone else's pain, right? Because sometimes people consider that karuna or mudita. It is not. Especially when you apply this technique, this approach, and by this question, is this taking me to Nibbana? Me feeling this way. And if you're really listening, if it does, it will say yes, because there's a sense of ease, non-agitation. But if it's the opposite, meaning there is agitation, guess what? That is an unwholesome joy, that is an unwholesome sorrow. Because even an anagami has sorrow in his heart. Why? Because they're not arahants yet. And you have a beautiful explanation of the Venerable Bhikkhuni Dhammadina in her response with Visakha, back and forth on this in the Cūḻa Veda lesson. But there needs to be this quality of serenity with it everywhere, every time. You ask the question, is this taking me to Nibbana? The answer should be a resounding, silent, serene yes. And if it isn't, drop it. Don't waste time. Even if it sounds lofty, even metta. Because sometimes people get so taken by, oh, so happy about that joyful thing that happens. And they grab onto that, meaning they don't listen to Lord Buddha's instruction in this sutta. Sabbe dhamma nalang abhinivesaya. Do not cling to this thing, including metta. That's why you have to quickly bring in upekkha. You have to leave the room, the door open for upekkha to come in. Otherwise, you're too out there. You're too agitated. There's not going to be any nibbana occurring. So is this taking me to nibbana? That's what Venerable Mahamogallana came to jolt with his big toe, the palace, to shake Sakka from his clouded state, to remind him of the Dhamma, and he was very quick. Sometimes that's what is necessary. And this is another thing that we don't see today. We don't see quality that we saw in Venerable Mahamogallana today, of not being so careful, sedated in their approach. No. How many teachers have you come across where they just will come out and tell you what needs to be said? Even in Buddhist circles. People are afraid of what you might think of them, what that might result in, the support they might lose from you, because you now see them in a different light. They're too rough around the edges. Another time also it happened where Venerable Mahamogallana did the same thing at the Pumba monastery, where the bhikkhus were talking about some other nonsense when they were supposed to be meditating. Remember the palace that Visakha had built, the Pumba monastery I was referring to in Savatthi? He looked around and he saw the bhikkhus, and that didn't please him. They weren't practicing why they had chosen that secluded lifestyle. And instead they were talking about other stuff. Unsuitable. Again, he touched one of those columns of the Visakha's monastery or / palace with his big toe. And he shook their life, their minds back into reality. So you don't need to have a teacher or somebody always doing that for you. Can you be Venerable Mahamogallana's big toe to yourself and jolt your life every once in a while? I'll stop here. If there are any questions, I'd like to answer them, if I can. Otherwise, okay, let's transfer some. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mamparanti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May this and all the other suttas that we've been covering together, as well as those that you might be doing, you're covering yourself, may they all guide you to deeper understanding of the Dhamma, where your relationship with yourself and how you view and look at the Dhamma and your life take you deeper, where you also start seeing that there isn't much of a difference. Your life need not be a cocoon outside of the Dhamma, something separate. The Dhamma needs to be speaking to us, with us. through the various interactions we have with the world. It should not be secluded, away, excluded from that, annexed from our lives. No. We're always bringing the Dhamma in. It's not utilitarian approach that we have with the Dhamma. It's everything. But that everything, in order for it to be present in our lives, means that me as the person has to be left out. That's humility. That is necessary. Sakka thought that he's beyond, he's above, he is Sakka, the king of the Devas. And Venerable Mahamogallana came all the way there, went there to remind him that he wasn't. And Sakka has never forgotten that. 2,600 years later, he still remembers that. And he bows to that encounter he had with Venerable Mahamogallana to this day. May you be well. May the Triple Gem bless you and all those who are dear to you. And may your difficulties be flattened. May you grow from them, by them. And may your practice deepen, your understanding deepen in you. May Magga Phala Nibbana appear in the mind, in your chitta, until you experience Akuppa Ceto Vimukti, unshakable freedom of the heart. That is Nibbana Supreme. And that is why we do these things. That is why we listen to the Dhamma. That is why we practice. May that be your reality. Sukhya.